Time is of the essence. We must assist our allies.
Hello folks, I just wanted to say this. There's one quote I remember that I watched. It's more like a documentary. Every battle is both a victory and a defeat. Depends which flag you fly. That is from a story documentary called Battles Won and Lost. So I'm trying to implement with this one. Why do I say this? Well, for starters, some games would cause other games for cancellation, but there are some games will influence the creation of it. Take for example Black Myth Wukong. Despite its hit piece, 2 million players on Steam, 10 million copies sold, and influence other games made in China, South Korea, and Japan to follow suit, knowing that live service, or perhaps in this case single player, is the key if done right. Same goes for live service. If done right, you can be successful. We need to check on Vera Dark.
We've all known Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was a behemoth failure for Warner Brothers games. It cost them over $200 million, but I genuinely don't know what they were thinking with this live service modern audience slop that they thought was going to sell, but literally everybody was telling them it was a terrible idea, though now we're finding out KTJL's failure is actually partly to blame for Wonder Woman's cancellation. But before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, this situation is sad, but also kind of funny because obviously I would love a really good, high-quality Wonder Woman game with the Nemesis system. That sounded initially like a great idea, but we've also seen a ton of feminists that were working on this project melting down, like Cypher of Tyr, or Tanya DePass as her name is. She was freaking out, threatening people. Then you have Gail Simone, who was apparently a consultant on this game, being so upset that it was canceled. But when you hear that there are a lot of feminists that were affiliated with this project, I just think it's funny that they ended up not getting this game launched, that they were so hoping was probably going to push a strong female agenda. But just a few months ago, Warner Brothers Games was basically recommitting themselves to their franchises, saying, oh, we want to make games with all of these characters. And one focus, they said, was DC, yet they're canceling a game from DC that could have probably been big. Though, after you know how terribly KTJL failed, it's not shocking to see why they ended up canceling Wonder Woman. So it says the cancellation of this game was partly caused by the underperformance of fellow DC title Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, according to an industry insider. So of course, take everything with a grain of salt, right? This was in a recent Kind of Funny Games podcast episode where, of course, Jason Schreier had talked about the issues that led to this cancellation. You know, don't believe everything you hear on the internet, but Jason Schreier has been pretty consistent when covering Warner Brothers games, though it says the Wonder Woman title was first announced at the Game Awards in 2021 with a short teaser trailer that excited many players. However, after years of little to no updates on it, Warner Brothers canceled the Wonder Woman game altogether. This is why companies need to get their shit together. It is so ridiculous that they end up announcing things years and years in advance and then they cancel them. This is why you cannot tease things until it's like 80% done, because they announced a game in 2021 and we all thought to ourselves, okay, clearly they've got to have some kind of content if they're feeling confident enough to show it off and actually officially announce it. Though now, all of these years later, they're just dropping it like a rock. And if they hadn't announced it in the first place, I understand that maybe investors wouldn't have been too happy, or they couldn't have at least started slightly building up hype, but it just makes them look ridiculous that it was so far in advance and now they're just straight up shelving it.
Okay, before we let Vera Dark continue, that's what happens when you hire activists. I don't know what Warner Brothers thinking, but then again, just so you know, Melody Mac just made a video on a transgender Supergirl. I don't know how they're gonna do that. That remains to be seen. It's a short teaser. Look, when you make a teaser, remember one thing, teaser is supposed to be first impression. Some teaser can be a good impression, some could be a bad impression, and some can influence the game's success. Look at Black Myth Wukong. If Game Science hadn't rejected Sweet Baby Inc.'s extortion, guess what? That game would have failed. Game Science stuck to their guns and focused on creating their games, despite the hit piece. Let's continue forward. Also, another thing I need to point out, I'm not giving Kind of Funny anything, since Greg Miller's act in the DICE Award, yeah, no thank you. Same goes for Jason Schreier.
Warner Bros. Also shut down the Wonder Woman development studio Monolith Productions, which is sad for me because I loved Shadow of Mordor, I loved Fear. Those games were fantastic, but we do know that they were kind of a shell of the company that they once were. A lot of the people that made those amazing games are no longer there. So it's like I love their memory, but also I didn't necessarily have an overabundance of faith in them to create a high quality experience like some of those past titles. It's like with Obsidian and BioWare and Volition and Rocksteady, right? Just because they made great games in the past doesn't mean that they can make great games in the future. So there is like a little bit of pain in my heart and soul for the fact that Monolith Productions was shut down. Also, I don't know what it is with companies in the 30-year mark. Volition was shut down during its 30th year. Monolith Productions is shut down during its 30th year. I think that number 30 is a curse number at this point for game studios. So Schreier had talked about the issues that led to this cancellation, and according to him, some decisions taken by Warner Brothers Games' former boss David Haddad greatly affected this development. I cannot believe David Haddad took down so many studios and projects because he was so bad at his job. It is insane that he stayed at this company for so long. He had shut down Monolith's new IP, which prompted several of Monolith's directors to resign. In consequence, the studio had to focus on rebuilding its team in Wonder Woman at the same time, and moreover, Wonder Woman was set to explore Shadow of Mordor's clever nemesis system, but the studio rebooted it to fit a more linear action style similar to God of War, but by then, it was kind of too late. It is crazy to think about the fact that they have the nemesis system, something people have waited for so many years to see again, that we have loved and that we have praised, and now we're not going to see it again, at least until 2036 when the patent is up. Even then, I don't know if we're going to see any games that adapt it, which is so heartbreaking. And then they take something that is so well loved and then they try to reboot it. Absolutely mind-boggling to me.
I think David Haddad is more likely the Herman Holtz of Warner Brothers. Herman Holtz is the one that advocate for Concord. What happened to that? Kaput. The game failed, studio shut down. And everybody still think, why is this guy still employed? I mean, seriously, Warner Bros., you have a good single player, an Arkham game, but you threw them away. And not only that, the success of Hogwarts Legacy, you also threw them away.
Last year, Suicide Squad was a humongous flop. They wrote off $200 million because of that. Multiverses and Quidditch Champions also both flops. They wrote off another $100 million because of that. They should have never tried to go with a standalone Quidditch game. What they should have done was made a Quidditch DLC for Hogwarts Legacy, and they could have made another $1 billion. If they sold that for like $20 or $30 and it gave you tons of cosmetics and then of course the mini game and more areas and some story content, that would have made them bank. But no, they had to do a standalone that absolutely nobody played. And then Multiverses was successful when it was in like the beta period, but then they took it offline for a while and then they ended up relaunching it, and the relaunch was a flop. The series of losses led to Haddad resigning as head in the eventual cancellation of Wonder Woman. JB took over the game division and plans on bringing profits by pushing the company's biggest brands like the potential Hogwarts Legacy sequel or the upcoming Game of Thrones King's Road. King's Road is not going to be a big title either. It is basically a mobile game that's being ported to PC. I think it's going to get some sales. I think there's going to be some people who are going to play it, but it definitely is not going to be as big as something like Hogwarts Legacy, that's for sure. It says, though, that this is, of course, not the first time that KTJL's poor performance has hit a major blow at video game studios, as its developer Rocksteady reportedly suffered layoffs in January. Suicide Squad recently released one last major update before support for the live service title ended. I would love to sit here and say, maybe companies are going to learn from this, right? Maybe they're not going to focus so much on live service flop anymore. Maybe they're not going to hire activists, but we know better than to hope that these companies are going to learn and going to change. It is going to take years and years before they actually maybe come around to the realization that these things are not working out for them. And it sucks because in the meantime, we are going to see even more franchises killed, even more studios go under. And if they had never went in this direction of rebooting the Arkhamverse, if they didn't bring it in this modern audience direction, maybe it could have been successful. But as you can see, it's got 215 players in game right now, and the all-time peak was 13,459. And sure, with single-player titles especially, people play them, and then they finish them, and then they only come back when there's like DLC or expansions or just some kind of new content or patches added. But that clearly didn't happen. Absolutely nobody had returned, and even the few modern audience members that played this are no longer talking about it because it's dead, and they deserve it. Rocksteady deserves it. Warner Brothers Games deserves it. And if they had listened to us from the start, okay, maybe they could have delayed this by a year. They could have actually changed the story around to feature Batman in a good capacity, I guess we'll say, other than just being a clone who ends up getting killed. They could have actually had him be a part of the kind of Suicide Squad at the very end. I always thought it would have been badass if Batman was like MIA for the whole entire thing until the Suicide Squad realized that they couldn't defeat Superman, and then Batman had to come in, and then basically Batman could have sacrificed himself. That would have been so amazing and such a great way to end Kevin Conroy's time as Batsy, but they didn't do that because we're talking about activists who are writing this, and it just sucks. It sucks that the Arkhamverse has gotten Suicide Squad, and we don't know what they're going to do with it next. At the end of the day, Suicide Squad will always exist now, and we are never going to be able to forget it.
I'll leave the full video link in the description. Now for me, it's a good thing I dodged a bullet. When it came out, I think it was February 2020. No wait, it was last year. I didn't have enough money to buy it because when I heard there was some issues with the server or anything, yeah, I'm checked out already. It baffles me. Why put a live service? I mean, why do you need to be like Fortnite? This is what people say the dangerous of chasing trends. Question is, take a look at Marvel Rivals. How did Marvel Rivals manage to convince Overwatch players to play Marvel Rivals? Well, it's because they put characters that are better than Overwatch 2. And now Marvel Rivals is convincing Call of Duty players. Well, there's still some time to get them convinced because there are some people who are still hardcore and have played Call of Duty for years. It's going to be tough to convince them. So Suicide Squad was shut down on May 30th, on the same day where Lost Soul Aside is going to be released. I think everyone is going to remember Suicide Squad. That's a mark. Similar with Black Myth Wukong. Suicide Squad will be remembered as the failed game that caused the whole entire structure to tumble down, while Black Myth Wukong will be remembered as the one that restored, or in this case, restored gaming to what it was years ago. Both single player and live service will succeed if done properly. Look at Black Myth Wukong. Because of Chinese mythology and all that, that success did not attract players, but it also attracted tourism. Black Myth Wukong's success have tripled tourism sales, and it also allows China to approve 110, or in this case more than 110 video games. So far we only know 6. There's more. Sometimes every game will succeed that will influence the whole future of the gaming industry. Same goes for the game that will fail, that will influence what game will be shut down or what game will be cancelled before they even see the light of day. So that's the difference between the East and the West when it comes to video game influence.
Your might on the battlefield proved most impressive. With a little more training, you will be right up there with me in no time.
Leave a like and subscribe if you want woke or anti-woke detected, or you just want to see me play games. Visit my second and third channel up here or link in the description.